Hello, and welcome to the 2022 edition of the CreativeOutletPortland.org's Writers Roundtable. This time we hear Six Fingers, a selection from Patrick Howard's soon-to-be-published short story collection, Conquering the Empire. Stay tuned.
Six Fingers. Ah, the new baby. A big, healthy baby boy, too. Mellow brown eyes and a wisp of blonde hair. At first no one had even noticed. "Wow, look, he's got 6 fingers," the nurse had said. "On both hands." "My God, you're right," replied the OB, "and 12 toes yet. That won't do." The young mother groggily lifted her head from the delivery table, making pathetic whimpering sounds, reaching for her baby. The OB, in a single motion, directed the nurse and child out the swinging door, and approached the mother, wearing a most benign and protective smile. There now, Sharon," he cooed, as if he were the mother and she the child. "We'll weigh him and measure him, then you can see him, right away." He stroked her forehead tenderly, and she was more than willing to drop off to sleep. It was one of those rare practical jokes that nature loves to play and is very good at playing. Sharon Adams was not amused, but as the young attending obstetrician explained the genetic mishap to her husband Matthew, he silently appreciated its macabre comic aspect. This sort of thing occurs every so often. The procedure is a routine matter. We of course leave the thumb intact, incise the skin around the extra finger. He made slicing movements around his own ring finger. Tie off the blood vessels, cut the bone at this point. He aped the procedure as if holding his digit in a pair of pliers, and finally suture. There is virtually no deformation, just a trace of a scar, if the operation is performed as early as possible. Essentially the same procedure for the feet. Any questions? Matt Adams, an electrical engineer who fancied himself a bit of a Renaissance man, automatically struck a pensive posture, conscious of the effect it had on others, instilling respect and uneasiness. His rugged features and bronzed skin lent unmistakable masculinity to this personage. "Let's go talk to my wife. I've got something to say to both of you." She was very emotional, refused to see the child. I think she blames herself in a way. She wants the surgery performed immediately. Matt chuckled. "Off with the fingers, eh? Hack them right off. Nothing to it. Makes sense, right? What else, right?" "Sweetheart, try to understand what I'm saying. Our son may be the beginning of a new race of men. No, now listen, granted, he is sort of a freak of nature," so matter-of-fact was his use of the term that she began to cry again. "But isn't any genius a freak in a way? We may have an offspring here that could master his environment far better than we normal everyday Homo sapiens." She was shaking her head wildly now, her hands over her ears, face twisted into a hysterical rictus of desperation. "You're crazy, do you know that? Can you imagine growing up like that? You know what people think. What we think when somebody abnormal walks by. We flinch, don't we? Maybe to ourselves it's true, but, oh, be sensible. People would think us the cruelest parents on the face of the earth." "Doctor, you surely must know what I mean. Origin of species and all that. It's evolution, man. It's really happening. An innovation like this could move civilization ahead 10 million years. The young healer, eager to be macho, now displayed the professional confidence instilled in him long ago by his father. "And naturally, we cannot say just what will happen, but experience tells me that a defect like this could permanently damage the child emotionally and socially. Children can be very cruel. Your son would be treated like something from outer space by his peers. Do we have the right to sentence an innocent child to that kind of life? I say we don't." "Oh, is that right? Fool. Don't you see that with the proper training and environment he could be anything, do anything? Why, he could be a Superman, a god." "Matthew, please. What's wrong with you? Are you mad?" "Mr. Adams, the longer we wait to perform the operation, the greater the chances for complications. Please reconsider." "No way. You know what your problem is? You're stuck in reverse, watching the world go by from between your legs. No wonder humanity is so damn primitive. See you later." He was out the door. Sharon and the OB sighed together and shook their heads. If they had known that Matthew was at this moment fetching his young son from the nursery, they would have been less complacent. Matt spent plenty of time with his new progeny, Evan Jeffrey. Fascinated by the possibilities for growth and development, he set out by designing whole learning environments equipped with bizarre toys and games to challenge the child's unique manual capabilities. Evan was unusually bright and attentive, and very much aware of his extra digits and the attention they drew. But aside from diapering and feeding the child, Sharon was virtually excluded from Evan's nurturing. She did not fully understand the nature of the training the boy was undergoing, and did not care to know either. Matt had forgotten to explain any of it to her, so enthralled was he with the task he had undertaken. Her initial repulsion from the child's appearance had been chilled by familiarity, though she could scarcely think about it without waxing melancholy. It was no longer her child at all. He had taken over, the madman and his monstrous little pet, she thought. As the first year wore on, she became further estranged from the two of them. Friends and relatives were not surprised when the marriage ended, Matthew taking uncontested custody of young Evan. With whatever knowledge and skills he had or could pick up, Matthew taught Evan intensively and lovingly. His son's dexterity in the manipulation of physical objects amazed him. So fast did it develop and surpass even his own. And, as if inextricably linked, his mind grew equally fast, so that by the age of 3, Evan had the verbal skills of a child of 10. Musical instruments proved no challenge to him. In response, his father designed and built 2 new instruments, one an 8-stringed violin and another resembling a flute but of confoundingly intricate key arrangement. These proved more to his liking. Matt gave him watches to dismantle, all manner of sculptor's tools and materials to work with, and for their mutual amusement, perfected dazzling sleight-of-hand tricks that defied the closest scrutiny. Perhaps their finest joint venture was a sign language that, through the use of extra digits, reduced words to simple gestures, and could convey complex phrases of the subtlest nuance. In this enterprise, Matt kept up with his son as best he could. As the boy grew stronger, he learned wilderness survival, when Matt would take Evan out to the woods for days at a time, with only a knife, an axe, and a length of rope. There the two would slip into an altered state of awareness, a heightened state, using their sign language only. 2 savages wordlessly discovering the beginnings of science and technology as if for the first time. It was Evan's high IQ and extraordinary academic success that allowed Matthew to keep him out of school. The education he received catered to his highly developed left hemisphere. Evan's mastery of physics and chemistry equaled the facility with which he tackled theoretical mathematics. He found it easier to work out problems in base 12 rather than the normal base 10, befitting his supernumerary digits. By his 16th birthday, Matt felt his son's education was drawing to a close. He had filled Evan with virtually all the worldly knowledge he could research and interpret. One day, Matthew, now in his 50s, drew his son close to him, and in reverent and soft tones related what had been an unspoken truth for many years. "You are different from the rest of them." "I know, Father. Believe me. In fact, I think I understand this gift of mine even better than you do, what it means for humanity." "Then you must not make the same mistake I did. When you find a woman, as you soon will, she must be your equal. I mean, she must." And he looked down at his son's hands, unable to say what both were thinking. "I understand. I have thought about it much. But please, don't think of my mother like that. I think she must have been a kind woman. Just not very evolved, that's all. She couldn't understand the significance of such a momentous freak as myself. Can you blame her?" "Honestly, I don't remember her very well. I admit I wasn't very kind to the woman. But I had a mission, son, if you can see what I mean." "I do, and now I have a mission too, don't I?" "Yes," he sighed. "You do, unfortunately. It can be quite a burden. Please, son, promise me you will use whatever powers you have with more wisdom and compassion than I did." "Don't worry, Father," and he placed his hand on that of his father. The sight of it gave Matthew a queasy feeling. Had it all been worth it? He would never know, for a year later Matthew was dead. And so, with a nominal bequest, enough to get him started, Evan set out on his pilgrimage to a place, if such a place existed, where he would find his genetic complement, a female of his own strange species, and in such a place he would find the birthplace of a new race, a new age.
Join us again for another edition of the Writers Roundtable. The Writers Roundtable is a project of the CreativeOutletPortland.org.